some drama in that.
Yeah.
We got through Sunday, and shockingly, Lane Kiffin is still at Ole Miss in Oxford.
He is. He's still at Oxford. And, I think from the Florida fan perspective and the things that we hear behind the scenes, which you guys hear the same stuff that I do, I still think there's a lot of confidence that Kiffin ends up in Gainesville. And I think that the information about Sunday wasn't coming from the UF side. I think it was coming from sources, contacts on the other side. I'll say it like that. And I think that it was linked to the thought that Ole Miss may force his hand, which would have been the only thing that made Sunday make sense, was that if they said, hey, listen, we need you to give us an answer one way or the other. And then once he gave his answer, Ole Miss saying like, okay, well, if you're not going to coach us next season, then you don't need to coach us the rest of this season either. And I don't know that I think it would have been smart for Ole Miss to give an ultimatum with regular season games left to go, but I could see where they would be over it. And, this is the part where I do feel for Ole Miss fans. I do think that there is some, I don't know. If he stays, it's not because he thinks they're equal programs. It's because he loves where he's at, loves the people around him, loves his players, loves Oxford. And that's okay. That's an emotional decision. And you can't argue with emotion. But if you were to put the two jobs on paper, I still think there's a gap. I agree that NIL has closed that gap somewhat. And I understand that Ole Miss has given him pretty much complete control. So I think it would be harder to walk away from than it would have been 10 years ago. But I still think one's a better job than the other when you take emotion out of it. But if I'm an Ole Miss fan, I am kind of tired of this at this point. It happened in 2022 with Auburn, and it happens now. And I understand, he said yesterday something about this is just our policy, this is our process. But it's not necessarily a great policy for your fan base, And I think you can get whatever number you want out of Ole Miss. So it's not about making sure I'm squeezing every last dollar before I sign an extension. He may really not know what it is that he wants to do, and he's still thinking about it. But if he's staying, he should go ahead and tell them that, because this stringing along is actually causing some divisiveness within their own fan base.
Yeah, as a Florida State fan, Jimbo did this every year with LSU, and then eventually left for Texas A&M, and it sucked because Florida State, Jimbo had some complaints about what he had been given, and Florida State didn't have the resources to do everything that Jimbo asked. But they never told him no. I will say that. Like, they always just said, like, we are working on, like, we are trying. Like, Jimbo really wanted the football only facility, and we were nowhere close to that in 2015, 2016. It literally just opened up this year. So a decade later. And so, I think they, will want more money for assistants. He did that every year, but his assistants kind of started to suck, like after the run they went on and they all got poached. And so, yeah, it sucks as a fan because, like, you're invested, and obviously we care about these programs more than any of these coaches. Let's be real. Like, it is a job for them. And so, like, yeah, from a fan perspective, like the Jimbo thing, and that's why most FSU fans, like, there's revisionist history now. Almost all FSU fans were just ready for him to go when he went. And they were like, dude, we're just tired of it. Like, and it was every offseason that he flirted with LSU. And then obviously he ends up at A&M, which is different than where he's been kind of flirting. But it was so tiring. Like, every single season, it would be like, well, he might leave. And social media was a thing then, but not like, obviously it has just grown and grown and grown over the last decade or so. And so, yeah, I get it. We've been there. I do think, and I don't know that I feel real strongly about this, but I think LSU is being really quiet right now. Like, you're not hearing about other candidates. You're not hearing about, they're doing this.
In this Lane Kiffin sweepstakes, whether or not they're talking about it publicly. They are.
If I had to guess right now, my gut is that he ends up at Florida, but like, him staying at Ole Miss wouldn't shock me. And there's a little bit of me that thinks he's just going to end up in Baton Rouge, like completely blindside everybody and it's almost like this distraction over here of UF Ole Miss, and then boom, he gets announced at LSU. So I'm not predicting that. I'm still predicting UF. Like my prediction means anything, but I like that just wouldn't surprise me at all, because that's typically how it works in these things.
LSU is a bigger player in this than I think the general public realizes, and conversations 1,000% have taken place. To my understanding, numbers have even been thrown around, or and what an NIL budget would look like and things like that. Now, I don't think that he ends up at LSU. I think for sure this LSU job will be used as leverage for either staying at Ole Miss or coming to Florida. I think I think the stuff that's gone on with the governor of Louisiana probably helps both Florida and LSU in this situation, because that's like a whole nother level of crazy that neither of the other schools have to deal with. But I definitely think that it's an interesting factor in this. And, I'm so interested to see what happens. I do think at some point Ole Miss demands an answer. I think that they're going to, like, I can't imagine them going into the playoffs without an answer. Now, how that forces his hand, we'll have to see, because if he wants the Florida job bad enough, he may have to say, I'm not going to be Ole Miss's coach in the playoffs. And I do think that's a really hard ask of a coach who this is what he's worked his whole career for, is making it onto the big stage, which is what, making the playoffs would entail. I just don't see a scenario where Ole Miss lets him coach the playoffs knowing he's going to Florida, but I also don't see a scenario where they don't make him give an answer before they go into there. So it's tricky. Well,
yeah, I think you'll get some clarity here pretty soon, because I tweeted this out yesterday. I think the first domino is going to be James Franklin at Virginia Tech, because Franklin has his eyes on the Florida job, right? He finds it appealing. So if you get a headline in like 48 hours that Franklin is finalizing a deal with Virginia Tech, then you probably know that Florida job is not open. That is getting closed up. So I think that'll be some of those dominoes that you start to see fall maybe early this week. I do think that there'll at least be an answer decided before the Egg Bowl. Whether that's public or not, I don't know. But I do think that there'll be a conclusion drawn, at least behind closed doors, in the next 7 or 8 days. And then we'll probably hear about it after Thanksgiving. So, I mean, there's a lot of time left, obviously, and these things can change like that.
Yeah.
LSU's definitely not out of it. I would be surprised if he does end up there at this point, just given all that we do know. But I think you'll start to see the dominoes fall one way or the other pretty soon. And then we'll have an answer, while we're having our leftovers.
Would you? So if I'm Ole Miss, I would not let him coach the playoff.
I'll be honest, I don't think I understand that.
Okay, so here's my thought: is like I just think it's too much going on with signing day. So it's not necessarily about coaching the playoffs; it's about everything else that's going on around it. But like, you need a coach in place for signing day. You need a coach in place for the portal. You need, and so like, how is he recruiting with split loyalties? Like, who is he recruiting for in December?
Yeah.
Like at those most crucial times. And so it's not necessarily about coaching in the playoffs, but I think you also just have to wonder like how, I mean, he has already like made his decision to go to UF. Can you really, like, as Lane Kiffin or really any human, can you really compartmentalize that much? Like, is he really focused on those actual playoff games too? Now, I don't think Ole Miss is a national championship competitor this season, right? I mean, they're there. And so, yes, think if they get a good draw or maybe they get an ACC team first round of the group of 5, yeah, like they could get to the semifinal and then shoot, you get lucky in one game or somebody else has a bad game against you, whatever. Like, yeah, you could do it. But like nobody really is picking Ole Miss to win it all. And so I don't know. I think it's those other things. It's not necessarily just about coaching the playoff games, but with signing day, with the portal, with trying to, how does the portal, if he is announced for UF or it's announced that he's taking the job,
he's still coaching in the portal.
How does the portal open for Florida, but it doesn't open for Ole Miss because they haven't announced a new coach. Like people can like it just gets so gray and weird that like I think if you're Ole Miss, you say like, hey man, we appreciate this.
Right.
Go ahead and go. Pete Golding will coach the playoffs. Like I don't know, man. It's a weird spot to be in for sure. Because maybe that's his audition for that. Maybe that's Pete's job or audition for the job.
Mm-hmm.
Let's play out these scenarios here. So the first scenario is after the Egg Bully comes out and says, Ole Miss is home. This is where I will be until I retire. And the rumors are put to bed then. Florida moves on to their next coach. Ole Miss goes into the playoffs with 100% confidence that Lane Kiffin is coaching their team in 2026 and beyond. So that's option one. Option two is that he comes out and takes the Florida job. Or the LSU job. But I think Florida job is more likely. But he takes another job. Ole Miss is then in this position where they say, okay, thank you for your service. You're done. And it's Golding. Or two, they let him coach the playoffs, which seems unlikely. The third scenario is they don't force his hand and he doesn't say anything. But that becomes the absolute worst kept secret as each day passes, because if Florida doesn't make a hire or LSU doesn't make a hire, whoever they're hiring has to still be playing in the playoffs. And what does that do to your team? You know, these questions, these wonderings, do you fully believe this coach? And then whatever dirty is going on behind the scenes in terms of recruits and the portal and everything else just becomes so complicated. So that last scenario seems maybe the most destructive to all parties, but particularly Ole Miss, because if they're making a hire, it's a lot harder for Ole Miss to make a hire at the end of the playoffs than it is for Florida to make a hire or LSU to make a hire. Your top tier programs, TJ, you and I have talked about this off air before. Alabama didn't have a problem stealing DeBoer when Washington was done because it's Alabama. I don't think Florida or LSU would have a huge problem getting somebody that was a playoff team because of who they are. Ole Miss's options are going to get more and more limited. You've got to think Ole Miss, in theory, would be in the Franklin sweepstakes. I don't know that he's their choice A, but if Florida's not open, Florida State's not open, you know, whatever, that might be a more appealing job than Virginia Tech. But the second he commits, he's not flipping ship a month later. So that's gone.
Yeah, I mean, you just think about Florida, like, so, all right, Lane signs an extension tomorrow, right? Theoretically. Who's Florida's next option? Like, who are their next three candidates? Like, who in your mind are their next three candidates?
Lincoln Riley. I think say no. Okay. I still think Drinkwitz is up there, even though he's not necessarily up there for me. And I think Jed Fish, probably, if you had to take the top three, and you could get any of them at any point, right?
Yeah, I think you could pull all those coaches in January. I don't think you.
Right, so it's less detrimental to Florida.
Yeah, I don't think it's a big deal. And if you're Ole Miss, okay, so same question. Who are Ole Miss's candidates? I mean, Pete Golding's up there.
Probably Summerall is up there, but I mean,
if Auburn doesn't take it, is Auburn a better job than Ole Miss?
Who doesn't look at him? I mean, but you think that's an option? Maybe Golish, even though I think USF's star is kind of dimmed a little bit in the last couple of weeks. Like your options are a little bit more limited, and schools that might get picked up from some of these other dominoes that are going to fall.
And so they might just keep Pete if that's the case. Yeah, you know, like if you have to go too far down the
sooner this happens, the more options they have. The longer it drags out, whether because they don't force their hand or he doesn't decide or whatever, the more limited they get. Now, if they were going to go with Pete regardless, then maybe it doesn't matter. And they would rather continue to try and convince Lane and hope that there's some, you know, sentimental something or other that happens the deeper they get in the playoffs. And maybe that's their play. I don't know. But none of these scenarios are perfect for any of these schools.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, I think Ole Miss's candidate pool is, you know, a tier below Florida's if Lane leaves. But I still think whatever their candidate pool is, outside of people getting picked up, like they would still be able to go out and get them. But I mean, I guess the same is true for Florida. You know, like you mentioned some of those guys like Lincoln Riley, like, well, what if LSU says we're tired of waiting on Lane and then he's gone to LSU? Then, you know, it's kind of the same thing. Like, I feel like the candidate pool,
it's a different tier, but it's the same concept.
Yeah. They could pick up, you know, if Summerall somehow didn't have a job yet, which I would be surprised by, but like they could go get him from Tulane in whatever time frame.
I mean, I think Ole Miss could steal in January, but the problem is if the guys you're looking at, other programs are looking at stealing, you're not stealing somebody a month into their new job. So That's what the issue is. You could get somebody that's still left at a USF or still left at a Tulane or still left, but the problem is if somebody else has already plucked them from those schools, that's where your pool is getting smaller.
Definitely. I do think we get an answer in 2 weeks. So hopefully this whole conversation where it's like total chaos, you don't know what's going on, doesn't come to fruition. But it is up there, right? Because, I mean, Ole Miss, like you said, will be less appealing to some of the other coaches if you're going head-to-head with other schools like Florida and LSU are. So I do think it's in the best interest of everybody to get it done in the next 2 weeks. And does that mean for Ole Miss they're going to have their coordinator coach in the playoffs? Yeah, probably, if he does decide to leave. But that's just kind of the reality of where they're at if you're the Rebels.